after receiving a few requests about my settings and color grading techniques, I thought I'd do a quick Phantom 3 Professional Extreme Color Grading tutorial and show you guys how I do things. Keep in mind that these are just the settings and preferences that I use, and doesn't mean that the way I'm doing it is the right way or the only way. Experiment and try for yourself, because I think that's part of the fun is just getting in there and trying some things yourself. And these things that I'm going to show you are things that I do that seem to work well for me, so I hope everybody could benefit from that. Before I get started, I think it's really important to answer or to mention the settings that I use when I film. This is a question that I'm getting more and more from individuals, and it's really important that you nail the settings in camera, when you shoot, because it doesn't matter what I do in post or what you can do in post. If the shot isn't properly exposed, then you don't have much to work with. So color grading doesn't really matter if you don't have good footage to work with to start with. So the settings that I use on my Phantom 3 when I shoot, it's a Phantom 3 Pro, so I shoot 4K at 24 frames per second. I use the custom settings. I found the sharpness of the Phantom is way too crispy, kind of crunchy looking. It's not real natural on the default setting of 0. So I tuned mine down to a -2. I found that still retains plenty of information and sharpness. Keep in mind, when you dial the camera's sharpness down, you're not taking sharpness away from the footage. It's kind of deceiving, because really negative, like for example, -3 is really kind of like no sharpening whatsoever. So don't think for a minute if you tune your sharpness down that you're taking sharpness away from your footage, because you are not. -2 seems to be the best setting for me, that doesn't have that real crispy, crunchy kind of look to it, and still maintains enough detail. Because you can always put sharpness in back in it in post. So that's what I do on sharpness. On contrast, I use a -3 because I want my footage as flat as possible. Again, if your blacks, if your contrast is too high, and like your shadows, your dark areas, if those blacks are crushed, you can't get that back in post. Once they are crushed to black, that's it, that you're stuck with it. Same with the highlights, with the whites. Once you blow out the sky or the clouds, where there's no pixel information left there to work with, there's nothing you can do in post for that. So -3 on contrast maintains more dynamic range is actually the term. Plenty of dynamic range to work with. My saturation, I turn it down to -2. From my testing, there's plenty of saturation left to work with in post. And again, if you oversaturate, use 0 or +1 or +2, oversaturation can also exaggerate, along with oversharpening, can also exaggerate noise and artifacting in the footage. The last thing is my white balance. I always use a manual white balance, never use the auto white balance, because that changes as you shoot. If you point the camera down and then point it straight ahead, the white balance is different. Usually it's a little cooler when you're pointing straight ahead versus when you point down. So those are the settings that I use. I shoot in the log color profile. Again, that's the more flat setting. I think it's the flattest setting that the Phantom 3 shoots in. As far as equipment goes, I can't stress enough how important it is to use an ND filter. That's a neutral density filter. An ND filter does two really important things. One, it allows you to shoot at a much more manageable shutter rate. The rule of thumb is if you're shooting at 24 frames per second, your shutter rate should be around double your frames per second. So my shutter speed should be about 50. Anywhere from 50 to 100 seems to work well. And the reason is because you get much more natural cinematic motion blur. People hate that word blur. It sounds like out of focus or something, but it's not. It's more natural. Motion blur is the effect that occurs, when you fly by a tree limb or over top trees very close, and you get this very natural blending of the pixels instead of this frame by frame, very choppy motion, and that's what occurs when you don't have an ND filter and your shutter speed, is up in the 500 or 1000 or 2000, because it's so bright outside. To get a proper exposure, the shutter has to go faster, and you end up getting this real stuttery, almost strobe-like effect to your motion. A new filter that I've been using, all of my filters that have been used in this tutorial are from Snake River Prototyping, SRP, and I'm using the ND CP8. It's a combination of an ND filter and a circular polarizer. I'm using the ND CP16, and the new one that they have out that is just wonderful, it's called a GND 16:8. It's a graduated neutral density filter that's 16 ND on top, much darker, and then it graduates to 8 on the bottom. And this thing is just fantastic because everybody knows that's shot with a Phantom or an Inspire. We're always battling. Do you expose for the sky or the land? Land is always 9 times out of 10 is much darker than the sky, and what you have is a beautiful landscape, but your sky's blown out, or vice versa. So what the graduated does is it tones down the sky area, and then as it fades to the 8 from 16 on top, it's lighter on the bottom, so your shot is much, much, much more balanced. I can't say enough good stuff about the graduated ND filter that Snake River Prototyping has just released about a month ago or so. So that's the equipment I use, and those are the settings that I use. So if you shoot with those settings, you should be ready to go in and start color grading and get some beautiful stuff from your footage. So let's move on to the first scene I wanted to talk about. This is the scene, and hopefully the computer will keep up here as I do this. This scene, I wanted to have somewhat of a sort of mystical kind of look. So what I did, I've got the basic color correction tools, fast color corrector, RGB curves, three-way color corrector. Those are the ones that I use most often. I'm going to scroll over to where the footage changes. So what I've done there is boosted up the blues. Three-way color corrector, you can see I pulled up the lower end, the shadows. I pulled those up quite a bit. And then in the mid-tones here, I pulled them over to the blues, and that's how you get this gorgeous kind of very cold blue look to it. Highlights are okay, so I left those there. And I've pumped up the saturation a little bit, 167 on the master and 200 on the midtones. That gives it that kind of look before. That's without the three-way, and that's with the three-way. There are two other things that are happening with this shot. Again, it had this kind of mystical, fantasy almost looking look to it, and the way I did that was with Premiere Pro 2015 CC, and that's what I'm using here. They've introduced Lumetri. Some people are calling it Lumetri, but either way, in Lumetri color, the one thing that I have added, and it's only this one thing. Let me open Lumetri. I have added the vignette, and you can see that right here. I've pulled it way down. Take it back to the center. You see the shot before, and then way down. And I like this for this shot anyway, because it pulls focus toward the center here. Without it, everything's kind of like blowing off, at the top here, and I don't know, your eye kind of wanders off here, to me anyway. A vignette like this, you can always overdo them, and by the way, everything I've done in this tutorial that I'm showing right now is overdone because YouTube sometimes isn't quite as vibrant and clear, and because of the compression that it does. So I'm kind of pushing it here on a lot of this stuff. I know it's over the top, but I think you get the point because it's easier to see. But anyway, so the vignette adds to this sort of, pulls the focus and adds to this mystical quality to it. The other thing is a great little trick down here. This layer above the corrected footage is an adjustment layer. And on this adjustment layer, the only thing that's there is, go back to there. What I've done is put the adjustment layer there, and then I've added a Gaussian blur to the adjustment layer, not the footage. Then the opacity, set the blend mode to overlay. And what that does is give this real soft, pretty, kind of, like I said, mystical quality. It doesn't take away detail. You can see there's all kinds of details in these leaves. But what it does is it gives it this soft, hazy look. I'll show you without. That's without it. And that's with it. And the key is here is you don't want to do 100 everything. The opacity, I've set it to 76, so the shot underneath is, kind of peeking through. And then the blurriness of the actual Gaussian blur is set to 92. You can up that more, but you start to lose it. There tends to be like a sweet spot. So around the 90s, I thought, looked like it worked pretty good. So you can see the shot before and the shot after. Okay, the next one is this shot. This shot, I just wanted it to be pretty. And I really wanted to work on this water because the water wasn't looking great to me. I'm using all the standard color correction tools that I usually use, three-way color corrector, RGB curves, and the fast color corrector. But the two other things going on with this shot that helped a lot. You see the water here? This is done with a mask. What I did was I grabbed the pen tool, back out a little bit, grabbed the pen tool and I clicked here, 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 and enclosed the path by clicking the original point again. And what that does is that creates a matte or a mask that for this color corrector that will only affect what's in the mask. Now the problem is, as this shot moves, this shape or the water here on this pond is going to morph and change because it's film. It's not a photograph. So what you do is you go to the beginning of the shot, draw your mask, and as soon as you do that, a point will appear. I'm sorry, not a point doesn't appear yet, but you draw your mask, and then what you do is you click on the stopwatch tool here, and that will activate a point. Then you go to the end of the shot, and you move that mask, move all those pixels, take them and tuck them, around the edge there, like that. And as soon as you do that, as soon as you change one of these points, it's going to draw a new keyframe right here. So what happens now is that matte or that mask will morph with the movement of the water like that, only affecting the surface of the water. And I'll show you the mask off, the color with it off. I'll get rid of the path. See, with it off, it was kind of, to me, that was kind of purple, looking, and it didn't to me, it didn't match the shot. These are really kind of cool blues up in here, and not a lot of reds. And so with the three-way color corrector on just that, I pulled in a little bit more of these greens and gave it more contrast and made it brighter. And then the other thing about this shot is the sky was just not punchy enough for me. There's some real pretty soft clouds there. So what I did was, this is a great little trick in Photoshop, create a square. This one's at 3840, so 4K size. So that means 3,840 pixels wide. And it's just a graduation up here from solid, kind of a royal blue, to nothing, to 0. And then save that as a Photoshop file, PSD file. Then bring that in to Premiere. Drop that over your piece of footage, right, like I've done here. And then select that layer. And what I've got is the opacity. Set that to overlay. I'm going to set it to normal and show you what it does. When it's set to normal, obviously that looks crazy. But when you set this to overlay, it doesn't affect the highlights. That's what's great about it. It only affects where there is saturation with the blend mode set to overlay. So without the graduated graphic that I built in Photoshop, you get that. It's before, after. And you see after how it brings the detail and that tonal range back, that the dynamic range, it really lifts that up where you can see the definition of the clouds and the blue skies. It just makes it a prettier shot. So you've got the before, and then I'll play it. And there you go. That's your shot. The next one, this one was kind of nuts. When I shot this, I didn't think it looked good at all. I thought, what a drab, flat, ugly, but you know, we'll see. But turns out there's lots of great stuff here in these pixels. I'll show you. Go ahead and sweep to it. And this one was pretty straightforward. This is the 3-way color corrector and RGB curves. You can see where I've brought my highlight, or my darks, sorry. My darks way in, really super dark. Left my highlights alone. 3-way color, I don't think I did anything on that one, okay. But that's pretty much what I did with that shot. There's a little bit of change to the white balance here with the fast color corrector. But that's pretty much what I did. Now the only other thing I've done here that's, I guess, cheating a little bit, requiring more stuff or more equipment or a different filter, is I have used reduce noise. This is Neat Videos reduce noise, because in here I was starting to get all kinds of different, you can almost see these little red pixels from pushing the shadows so much. So let's see if I can get that back. But the noise reducer helps a tremendous amount in getting rid of all that. It almost looks like chromatic aberration. There we go. So now you can see how clean and smooth that shot is. I'm not going to play that because it's got to render that with that filter on there, but you get the idea. Let's go to the next shot. Again, this shot is very similar to the one right before. And the trick here, again, was using this graduated tone laid over top of the footage. And then the opacity of that graduated tone, or that graphic I built in Photoshop, is the opacity blend mode is set to overlay at about 58%. So you can see without that graduation, oh, that was without, and that's with. Without it, you get that, and then there's with. So it just brings out some of the tonal range in the darker areas. And again, I did the same thing to this one with the water. Hold on, it's not the water. Same thing, traveling matte. And you can see the points here. Those are places where I've adjusted the whole matte, so it'll morph from this pixel to that pixel. The path has changed, so it moves and morphs with the shape. And you notice it's got a slight feather. It's very slight, but 28 pixels. That's so you don't have a hard line, you know, right there of whatever color change you've made. And then the final thing was I did one more mask up here, and I did this to kind of darken these. So that's without it. You can see this path. Back out a little bit. Too much. There's the path. It kind of masks and fits this shape, kind of an ellipse shape. But without that, that's what it would look like. But with it, and look at the feather I've got on this. That way it doesn't affect the treetops. It blends into the treetops. But that gives you more definition for the sky. So that shot starts out, and then that's what that looks like. Let's see. Got one here. The sunset one is a lot of fun. Again, you can tell how I shoot, you know, with the contrast being down to -3, and shooting the log profile, saturation at -2, you get a wonderful flat image. And I say wonderful because it is. This is the kind of image that you can really work with. For this one, same color corrections. Use the RGB curves on this. Let me scroll up to where it changes. There you go. So you can see how that changes. What really helps this shot again is that graduated file that I built, because I'll turn that off. And you can see it's just kind of an orange shot, which is still, I think, a pretty shot, but you add this and you bring more colors back into the spectrum other than oranges and yellows. So you get the blues back and some of these light pinks and purples. Then the final shot I have here, I thought I'd go ahead and throw in a low light shot. I've tried some messing around a little bit, just to see what the Phantom 3 could do, what its camera can do with low light. And this is tough with any camera, especially a camera this size with a sensor that's so small. It just doesn't have a lot of light gathering capabilities. But you know, I shot this at a park, and the sun had already gone down, and so man, there wasn't much to work with. But I thought let's just see what we can do with it. So the trick with dark shots is let them be dark. You know, don't try to turn them into something that they're not. You know, keep them dark. And so what I've done is I've gone on and just pushed those darker areas and let them be dark shadows and almost crushed in here with the blacks. And you see over here with the RGB curves on the bottom end, I didn't have to push too much. I mean, it's a dark shot, so just a little bit to give it a little bit more contrast. Same with the graduation on the sky, just to pump up those colors a little bit. And of course I've kind of cheated here because it was a pretty bland shot, so I've cheated a little bit by using the star glow effect. This is from Red Giant. The star glow effect is what's giving me these wonderful little shimmers, these starlights on these little lamps that are around this fountain in the center. But you know, all things said and done, as far as a dark shot goes, which are pretty much impossible to do with a camera this size, even like with a GoPro Hero 4, this is virtually impossible because you get so much noise introduced. I think the ISO of this shot was at 800, and I never shoot over 400 on the Phantom 3. The ISO of 400, to me, in my own personal opinion, I think that is just way too much noise that's introduced into the footage, and it's just not appealing. But that little bit of star glow stuff adds a little bit of zing to the shot, I think. So I think that worked. That's the last shot that I could think of to talk about that has enough variation to it. I hope this has helped, and if you have any questions at all or wonder how I did something or need more clarification, please feel free to send me a note or a personal message or the comments below, and I'll try my best to answer them. And also, guys, if you see me doing anything wrong, I'd hate to misinform anybody on the proper way to do something. Please call me out on it. I'm always trying to learn new stuff, and if it weren't for people like you, I don't know what I'd do. I've learned a lot from friends and the tutorials that I've seen on YouTube, and the friends I've made from doing those tutorials, and become acquainted with the community. But anyway, thanks for watching, and I hope everyone has a great day.